8 most terrifying serial killers. 8. Manson family. Charles Manson is an American criminal who was the head of what became known as the Manson family, a quasi-commune that arose in the California desert in the late 1960s. Manson and his followers committed a series of 9 murders at 4 locations over a period of 5 weeks in the summer of 1969. In 1971, he was found guilty of conspiracy to commit the murders of 7 people, most notably of the actress Sharon Tate, all of which were carried out by members of the group at his instruction. He's currently serving 9 concurrent life sentences at Corcoran State Prison in Corcoran, California. Manson believed in what he called helter-skelter, a term he took from the Beatles' song of the same name. Manson believed helter-skelter to be an impending apocalyptic race war, which he described in his own version of the lyrics to the Beatles' song. He believed the murders would help precipitate that war. From the beginning of his notoriety, a pop culture arose around him in which he ultimately became an emblem of insanity, violence, and the macabre. 7. Ed Gein. Though Ed Gein's victims count is pretty low, he was only found guilty of 2 murders. The absolutely sick nature of his crimes make him one of the most notorious serial killers in history. After his mother died, Gein began digging up women who resembled her from the cemetery and fashioning together a suit out of their skins. Later on, police discovered a veritable museum of body parts in his home, featuring furniture upholstered with human flesh, skull bones, and even a belt made of human nipples. Gein is said to have inspired 3 very notorious fictional characters: Norman Bates of Psycho, Buffalo Bill of The Silence of the Lambs, and Leatherface of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. 6. Richard Trenton Chase. Known as the Vampire of Sacramento, Chase began by drinking the blood of small animals like rabbits and birds, sometimes blending their organs with Coca-Cola to make a totally disgusting concoction. After being released from a mental institution, Chase moved on to human targets. He engaged in both necrophilia and cannibalism with his victims, often dismembering them and drinking their blood. Over the course of 1 month in 1977, Chase killed 6 people in California and was caught when he murdered an entire family in 1979. Later that year, Chase was sentenced to death but beat the system by committing suicide in his cell a year later. 5. Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy perfectly fits the profile of the normal, even good-looking guy who moonlights as a sadist. Between 1974 and 1978, Bundy kidnapped and murdered at least 30 women, and those were just the ones he confessed to, or who police found. The clever and cruel Bundy would pretend to be disabled or an authority figure in order to lure unsuspecting victims into his trap. He would then rape, torture, kill, and dismember them. Just because you're evil and murderous doesn't mean you can't be sentimental, though. Bundy kept the severed heads of his victims as keepsakes. 4. Aileen Wuornos. Arguably the most well-known female serial killer of all time, Wuornos killed at least 7 men when she was working as a prostitute between 1989 and 1990. Wuornos gained even more infamy when Charlize Theron completely transformed herself to portray her in the 2003 film Monster, a role that won her the Best Actress Oscar. The film came out 1 year after Wuornos was executed via lethal injection. 3. Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer. Known as the Green River Killer, Gary Ridgway was convicted of 49 murders, making him the most prolific American serial killer based on confirmed killings. In the 1980s and 1990s, Ridgway would lure women and girls close by showing them a picture of his son, and then he would strangle them before throwing their bodies into the Green River in Washington State. 2. Dennis Rader, BTK Killer. Dennis Rader killed at least 10 people between 1974 and 1991 in and around Wichita, Kansas. Known as the BTK, Bind, Torture, and Kill Killer, Rader led police to his own capture by sending them a floppy disk that contained crucial evidence. Unfortunately, Rader's campaign for notoriety worked, since we're still talking about him to this day. 1. John Wayne Gacy, the Killer Clown. A husband and father, Gacy was first arrested after being caught sexually assaulting 2 teenage boys in 1968 and was sentenced to 10 years in jail. But because he behaved behind bars, he was released after only 18 months, proving that the U.S. legal and criminal system was severely lacking at the time. After he was released, Gacy became a popular member of his community as Pogo the Clown and regularly visited children's parties and events. Had he reformed? Not a chance. Over the next 6 years, he would kidnap, rape, torture, and brutally murder 33 boys. He received the death penalty for his crimes in 1994, but he probably should have never left jail the first time.